So hello, everyone. First, I'd like to thank you for your time. As James said, I'm Kurt Meyer, and I'm the Manager of Global Content Development and Preservation at LLMC. This talk will serve as a brief introduction to who we are and what we do. If you're already familiar with us, I will also be going into what we have going on right now currently in terms of content and some of our major content initiatives going forward. So moving on to the next slide. LLMC stands for the Law Library Microform Consortium. And the company was founded in 1976, and as you may surmise from the spelled out acronym, the initial focus was microfiche. And the idea back then was libraries would donate books to the consortium. LLMC would then film those books, send them back, and then sell the fiche to libraries throughout the world who wouldn't otherwise have access to these types of materials. And the materials tend to focus on harder to get materials, like foreign materials, historical materials, things from like the British colonies, things like that, and that's what the company focused on. Of course, eventually, something called the internet came into play, and fiche sales dried up, and the company realized that probably wasn't the best way to serve its members anymore. So in 2003, the company converted to a digital format, and the idea is still similar. Libraries will donate books to the consortium. We scan them. We have unique preservation options for those books when libraries want to take advantage of those. And then we provide access to the materials, not with fiche, but with an online database. And since the company's beginnings, it has always been a 501c3 nonprofit. Going to the next slide. This is a 50,000-foot view of what we offer. I'll go into a little bit more detail later, but given the time constraints, I can't show you everything. Right now we have 13,000 titles online, and put very generally, we have historical legal materials from around the world. And we also have some current legal materials as well. Some states rely on us to scan and preserve their session laws and other primary sources. So in some instances, our coverage extends to 2018 and goes far back too. We have historical U.S. legal materials. I'll go into more into that later. But again, it's legal materials from around the world and government materials as well. So going to the next slide, I can tell you a little bit more about our preservation options. A large portion of our new content comes from book donations, and that's mostly from member libraries. And we offer an option for print preservation that few, if anyone else, offers. So the books are stored in a salt mine in Kansas. And you may ask, why would we store books in a salt mine in Kansas? And the answer is, this is a pretty reliable and affordable preservation option. This location is also where movie companies store original reels of film. And it works because it's a safe place. The temperatures remain pretty constant. There are no water or insect issues. And we found it to be a tried and true reliable option. We also inventory every single book that gets put in the salt mines. So in the unlikely event somebody would like for a specific volume to be pulled because they need to see an original copy, instead of viewing the digitized copy on our database, they can actually do that. And along with the electronic access we provide, we also, and I believe this is part of preservation as well, we write abstracts for every single title that goes online, and when necessary, if we scan something that has not been cataloged in OCLC, we create a detailed catalog record for it. So it's not just digitized, but actually findable online. Going to the next slide, I'll detail a little bit more about our strategic alliance with CRL. I know James went into this a little bit. The alliance is kind of in two parts, at least in my mind. So as James explained, we assist CRL in terms of finding resources related to its global resources priorities. And these currently focus on Latin American, Eastern Europe, Cuba, Africa, and South Asia legal and government materials. And then we also work cooperatively with CRL to digitize other collections. Some of these are actually from CRL directly. Some collections we've actually merged CRL print collections with other ones we received in book donations. And these have kind of tended to be very large projects. One in particular was a 50-state legislative journal project. We digitized CRL's entire collection. Those are online. And we're actually merging that with another big collection we got from microfilm. So we'll have a pretty unique collection there. And then we decided to expand the project, and we're doing legislative documents. So these would be things like state legislature reports, draft bills, things like that. So the partnership has those two parts. And then at the end of it all, the best thing about it is access to these materials is extended to all CRL members. And if you use LLMC's catalog records, you can find everything we offer in your OPAC. So that's great. Going on to the next slide, I'll give you a brief overview of what we offer in terms of content, a little bit more detail than I did before. Remember I said that we have a historical, legal, and government materials? Well, this is a word cloud I created with our collections list. And, here we've got some big words and small words. The big ones are ones that are a little bit more represented in our collections. So you're seeing British, Anglo-American, some U.S. states. So those are pretty obvious jurisdictions we offer content from. But then we also have Cameroon, Togo, Congo, Panama. This represents the African and Latin American content that we have. Some of these collections are rather sparse, and we're always looking for additional content in them. And then some are very comprehensive. And we have historical legal materials going back quite a ways and many different types of materials for those jurisdictions. So going to the next slide, I can show you an example of a comprehensive collection we have. This is due to a partnership we have with the Law Library of Congress, and most of this content is due to that partnership. And these are Mexican legal materials. We have federal and state materials. On the federal level, there are individually published laws, codes, executive orders, and even some secondary sources like treatises. And then we have legal materials from all the different Mexican states. These are various and sundry, but just to give you an example, there's kind of an interesting one from the late 1800s, setting up a local justice of the peace office, and that would be interesting from a historical, legal perspective. Going to the next slide, I just saw the question about Hadi Trust come up. I will answer that toward the end. That's a great question. So I just kind of explained what we have online currently. Now I'll kind of tell you what we have going forward, what are our major content initiatives. The biggest initiative we have right now is the Early State Records Project, and that will be state legal and government records from the lower 48 states. We also have a partnership with the Digital Library of the Caribbean, University of Florida, Miami University, FIU, and Columbia to digitize historical Cuban materials. Of course, CRL has a direct interest in this too, so that all works out. And on our end, we've kind of we started off digitizing pre-revolution government materials, and the Cuban government was actually happy to see those. I'm speculating, but my guess is maybe those were thrown out before, and they're recognizing a need for them now. And then lately, we've actually been seeing more post-revolution materials that are coming from U.S. libraries. And the Cuban government has been very kind to give us copyright permission for those more current materials. We also have content initiatives with Latin American countries. I mentioned our partnership with the Law Library of Congress. We actually get right of first refusal when they discard books. So as a result of that, that's kind of nice because they used to collect in duplicate and triplicate. We've been getting a lot of content from Mexico, Nicaragua, Argentina, Uruguay, and Peru. Africa, we've got a lot going on there. We've received some material from various libraries, kind of on a piecemeal basis. But I'm happy to tell you all that we're focusing on a large project that deals with foreign official gazettes. These were kind of legal newspapers that were commonly published in British colonies, kind of letting the Crown in London know what was going on in all the colonies, even on a granular level. And we're going to be getting these materials from a variety of U.S. law libraries, possibly from CRL too, because they have some, and we're hoping to have a unique collection of these newspapers. And then we also have, as I mentioned, the State Legislative Materials Content Initiative that is going forward. We're currently working on legislative documents and some other things from CRL's collection. And then last but not least, and this is a big one, the Berlin State Library has an already digitized collection of historical legal treatises from German principalities and states. They tend to be from the late 19th and early 20th century. And they digitize them, and they're beautiful copies, but the metadata is very sparse. So they're online, but not that findable. So we are reprocessing the images and providing metadata for them so they can be found in catalog records. And these are materials which are probably more than rare in the United States. Most of them are not here on this continent, only in Europe. So moving on to the next slide, I'll tell you quickly about the Early State Records project. Before I get into that, if you look at the screenshot from LMC, for any of you who have used our service before and were familiar with the older document viewer, just know that we've updated that. So we've got the ability to flip back and forth between pages and use bookmarks, navigate back and forth between a table of contents and a specific page. So if you used LMC in the past and haven't recently, that has been improved. Okay. Back to Early State Records. This is a large project. It comprises 2,000 reels of film. And the original microfilm set was compiled by the Library of Congress and the University of North Carolina in the 1940s. It was originally meant to be a preservation project for state legislative journals, and then it ended up turning into something much bigger. Put very simply, it's colonial. It goes from colonial, territorial times, depending on the state, to the Civil War, and it has a lot of things: executive materials, legislative, historical newspapers, notes, these things called broadsides, which were announcements that were kind of posted in the town square, alerting the residents to current events. It's various and sundry. There are a lot of manuscripts. But just know that it was all materials that were hand selected for some reason by experts at the time. So a little more about that in the next slide. You may be wondering why no one has touched this before. Well, I just said it was 2,000 reels of film, and the gentleman who created the set or spearheaded the project, he created a finding aid, but 2 books to cover 2,000 reels of film, it's a bear to navigate. And also there were, preservation issues at the time of filming. They filmed copies of things that had been burned, or the handwriting was faded. So it's a rather laborious task to actually digitize this whole set. And then, going beyond digitization, there's also the issue of, you can scan it, but then people have to be able to find the materials online. So to really make it usable, you need to go above and beyond the finding aid and catalog, write abstracts for every single title in the whole collection, which we are actually doing. It's going to take years. We've made a lot of progress thus far, but that is actually why no one else has touched it, and which is unfortunate because the content is unique. Once they started filming, they started getting into all these different types of materials. There are historical newspapers from key points in time, and you can tell that the librarians who identified these materials knew they had historical relevance and were in dire need of some type of preservation option, at least given the technology at the time. So it's a big project, and in the next slide, I'm going to talk about, kind of how we're splitting it up. It's in 2 phases, and this should be pretty intuitive. We started off with the original 13 colonies, Maine and Florida, and then any Native American materials we can identify. And I kind of call that the I-95 part of the project. If a state has I-95 running through it, that's phase 1 of the project. We have completed digitization for that phase, and we're currently processing metadata. And that has gone well. We successfully fundraised for that phase, and I'm proud to say it's going great. We're now currently in the process of digitizing phase 2, which is the rest of the country, and we are actively fundraising for that phase as well. So that kind of sums up our content initiatives and everything else we have going on in addition to early state records. If you could move on to the next slide. My contact information is on this slide, and our executive directors is as well. I noticed there was a question that popped up, and I can read this aloud for the group. What, if any, connection is there between LMC's digitized connections and Hadi Trust? I think there's some great potential in bringing the power of the Hadi Trust Research Center tools to bear on the combined and highly related collections. We don't have anything more than a loose connection right now. However, I think that may change in the future, and we're hoping to talk to them. We have in the past, and I agree there's definitely an obvious synergy between our 2 organizations. So hopefully there will be more on that front in the future.
Great, Kurt. Hi, this is James again, with a reminder that if folks have other questions, to submit them in the chat box or the Q&A box if you see them, and we will address them. I do have a couple of follow-ons here first, though, so get your fingers typing. Kurt, thank you so much for this. This is it's a great overview and refresher, I think, for those members who have paid attention to the partnership. It's certainly, to our minds, this partnership works extraordinarily well because the organizations have such similar missions, similar constituency in terms of at least our academic partners. And this long view towards access and preservation. This is one of the models that we look towards when we're looking at future partnerships with other organizations. So it's not so much a question as a comment that we think that this partnership is particularly valuable for the reasons you mentioned on your on your slide between the two organizations. But it really also, to us, it speaks to the broader picture of the shared landscape that our institutions are working in. So we're always happy to get feedback from our members about the value of this material and the nature of the partnership, but we think it's working very well. I did have a question, a couple questions actually that came up that maybe you could tease out a little bit. Number one, you mentioned people's OPACs. Can you refresh our memory about the availability of LLMC records?
Yes, we provide. Sorry, I was getting a little feedback there. We provide catalog records through OCLC, and we actually provide documentation on how to download those on our sites. Please keep in mind I was a reference and instructional librarian for over 10 years, so this is not my strong suit. But we do encourage members to download those records, and if you're having issues doing so, we do our best to provide support for that. And then they have to be maintained periodically. Most member institutions have internal procedures for that. And then once they're downloaded, all of our records are findable in your OPAC, as you would expect. And as we've moved toward that, a little bit, I don't want to say away from, but we move more toward, promoting the catalog records instead of going directly into the database and searching. We've seen that type of usage skyrocket. Once people have that access to search by subject, author, and things in their OPAC, member institution statistics go up quite a bit.
We find that's very similar to CRL's experience as well when people load our records, by the way. One of the
Makes sense.
One of the things that we were hoping to cover, and I know you described it briefly in the interest of time, but I did want to reiterate here to the participants that LLMC has undergone a really nice refresh of the usability of its site. Can you just highlight some of the platform improvements in a nutshell, what you were working towards with this most recent release?
Yes. We received feedback more than once over on navigation at the document level. And not to go, in too much detail into the past, but the way it was, you would open up a document, and what was going on in the back end is you were actually just seeing the first page, and then you had to select a range of pages. On the back end, it would collect those pages, turn them into a PDF, and then you could navigate that PDF from there. So what's going on now is we reprocess, everything in LLMC, and I truly mean that. So that way, when you go in, the documents are already loaded. They show up quickly. The load times are more than acceptable. And then, in addition to that, you also get an improved document viewing experience. I like to say it's what you would expect. So if you were used to using Adobe or just viewing documents in Chrome and things like that, you're getting all those functionalities you would expect without anything unintuitive. You can search within the document, zoom in and out, go full screen. All those nice options we're kind of used to in 2018 are there now. And we're very proud of it. And we made announcements, and some people missed those, and then the next time they used LLMC, they emailed us and said how happy they were with the changes.
That's great. We will. I see some follow-on questions relating to the functionality enhancements and an encouragement to send out some information about that to the broader CRL membership, and perhaps include a link to it from our page to those as well. And certainly, absolutely, I think that's important because we were beta participants. CRL staff were beta participants in testing out the new functionality, and can attest to the vast improvement and ease of use of the collections, and including the much more prominent positioning of the full text searchability, which previously was a little bit mysterious. I think right now it's front and center, and I hope that your use statistics are bearing out increased use in that from that perspective.
Yes.
Good. We have a question from a member about the early state records projects, and this question had about the expected timeline for the rest of the project. I think this, many of our members are aware, but maybe not all of them, is that in the fundraising campaign for what we call Early State Records Phase 2, CRL has put together an offer to its members, member institutions, to help essentially crowdsource the funding for the digitization of that second half. That information is in our e-Desiderata platform. But Kurt, do you have any statement about how institutions can contribute to the fundraising for this?
Yes, we try to make it as easy as possible, and historically we've taken the donations large and small for it. We also at times have we're more than willing to meet with people if they have any questions on time frames and exactly what the project will entail. We try to work with people. We also are willing to donate images back to donating institutions too, when applicable. So that option is there as well.
That's great. One of the things that I think appealed to the variety of the Phase 1 funders was that ability to receive back the images from their state from this collection. Yeah. And my understanding was that those institutions could do whatever they wanted with those files, both the images as well as the OCR and metadata, including putting it up on their site for open access if they so desired. So that still applies to the Phase 2 as well, correct?
Yes, and we tried to put the states already donated to the front of the queue, so that way we can get those images to them faster and get them access to these materials faster.
Fantastic. Let me just check to see if there are any other questions. Yes, one of the questions was some more information about the funding for Phase 2. There was a question of whether or not there's a list of the institutions who have funded. I don't think we've put one up yet on our site, but I would be happy to do so because I think that's important for those institutions who are considering participation to know whether other institutions in their state, for example, are already piecing this together. We've actually had a few cases where institutions have reached out to other partners in the state or perhaps within their own institution to piece together the funding to support that state activity. So that's definitely a possibility. Great. There was just one quick follow-on regarding the Hadi Trust, was just reflecting back that the Collections Committee of Hadi Trust have been interested in pursuing U.S. state documents. I think that was news to me, but that's good. And so they're proceeding. So there's another reason to continue the conversation.
Yes, it sounds like there's a lot to talk about there.
That's great. I'll just pause for a second and make sure we've cleared all of the questions here. Well, thank you so much, Kurt, for that update. We really appreciate the news, and we will put more information up about early state records and the platform improvements. We do routinely communicate out from some of the completed programs and significant activities between the two organizations. And so please do tune into CRL's website to see those news items.